Great. Last session before we break into our tracks, and several of these people you've heard from already this morning. But first of all, we're going to talk about hybrid OTT and its future. And I thought, as a starter, even for the people who literally introduced themselves over 10 minutes ago, quick intro from everybody and your sort of current understanding and thoughts about the hybrid OTT market. Stuart.
Okay, yes, so, is that microphone on? Yeah.
Yep.
So, Vice President of Corporate Strategy at InnoQuest. My role is to figure out where we're going next, where the industry's going next, and make sure we're aligned with that, and we can help the operators deliver the video that they want to deliver. We are seeing a lot of... Do you want me to cover the hybrid stuff now, or do you want me to pass on the intro?
A quick position would be good.
Okay. We pretty much see everything that's going on in the industry. When people start building prototype systems, laboratory systems for hybrid video, they tend to call us in to look at this fairly early on because something new, some new protocol, something that's different there that they're going to need to be able to monitor and see what's going on. And I can certainly tell you there's a lot. It's a complex laboratory out there. There's a lot of different things going on, a lot of different ways people are looking at delivering hybrid services. And I think the laboratory phrase is something that's going to be key for the next few years as the systems integrators sort of stabilize these hybrid services and figure out how they can offer this end-to-end and meet the operator's requirements.
Thanks. My name's Kate Opakar. I'm Director of Hardware Business Development at Spotify, based in our London office. And I'm responsible for our business development relationships with set-top box and smart TV manufacturers. Just for those of you who may not know Spotify, we're the largest music streaming service. We are today available in 55 markets, and we have 24 million monthly active users, 6 million paid users as well. And when we look at hybrid OTT, we think it's, of course, a good thing to integrate OTT into the experience because really the way that people are consuming content today is changing very rapidly. And we see anything that brings more options to the user in terms of content as a great thing.
Thank you, Kate.
Good morning. My name is Lucas Cornell. I'm with Liberty Global, cable operator active in 14 countries, of which 12 in Europe, including the UK. I'm based in Amsterdam, where our European operational head office is located. And I look after programming. I look after content. So I deal with what I think is the core of the proposition, what we've been talking about before. I deal with our content partners, both from a studio perspective, channels perspective. And clearly, hybrid OTT, whichever way you look at it, bringing content to our cable networks and our set-top boxes by means of apps. In other words, bringing the internet to the television experience, or the other way around, bringing the traditional pay TV television services to the internet by means of authenticated TV Everywhere services is crucial. So we're working very hard on that, and there's a lot of innovation and a lot of trialing going on within our company as well.
Thank you. My name is Robert Delamar. I'm the co-founder and chief commercial officer of a company called UUX. Some of you may know me as the former CEO of Total Movie, which was a retail over-the-top service in Latin America, serving 40-plus countries. We merged last year with a company called Over the Top Networks, formerly known as Lab One of Sao Paulo, Brazil. And we provide hybrid OTT services as an end-to-end managed service for telcos. Our biggest customers are Telefonica and Telenor. And just this past year, in 90 days, we launched a hybrid OTT service for Telenor Hungary. And what we did was we worked with a local DVB-T provider called Antenna Hungaria, and we became essentially the cloud-based mobile television service for the LTE part of the delivery, and Antenna Hungaria provides the live linear streaming to the lean-back experience to the big TVs. But from our perspective, I mean, in this day and age, our view is that devices are like large televisions, especially in the emerging smart TV world, are simply clients on a network, and that all content should be delivered from the cloud. And so I think I'm here to probably antagonize people a little bit and evangelize what we believe is not the future, but rather now, the opportunity for the space.
Hello. So my name is Philippe Roses. I'm from Orange. I'm in the CTO organization, and my team is in charge of delivering the TV solutions to the Orange country. So from my position, I see OTT as technologies and as a very interesting technical option. But I think that it's not the only possible option. It really depends for a telco of the local situation, the situation of the network, the competition, the free-to-air that is offered over DTT or satellite. So we see it as a very interesting option, and we think that the key point is really managing the complexity, and OTT technologies are also an interesting way for managing the complexity on Converge.
Hi, my name is Ben Huang. I run marketing for the IPTV business at Ericsson. And so that portfolio essentially includes the IPTV efforts that Ericsson was driving, in addition to the Media Room acquisition that came over from Microsoft about half a year ago, and then recently the Azuki acquisition out of Boston, and then some of the content management systems products. So that comprises the portfolio. And so when we think about hybrid OTT services, we actually have a pretty broad view in terms of thinking about the different types of networks that you're wanting to bring together, to the different types of client side, CPE, consumer premise equipment, and how you're bringing hybrid services together, all the way to what the consumer experience is like when you're bringing disparate sources of information, disparate sources of content to that consumer.
Great, thanks, Ben. Thank you all for those introductions. My first question, and Robert, you may not be on your own here, actually. Surely the whole hybrid concept is a bridging product. Once we get to a point when the network and the cloud is strong enough to deliver everything unicast, we don't need those old networks. Right. Or the networks at least become irrelevant. Whatever the cheapest route to deliver that pipe into the home is, cable, telco, that will be all that we need, with quality of service guarantees and things in place. But the hybrid bit goes away. We don't need that linear program anymore, or it will be delivered with our other package.
Precisely. So look, I hope that Informa doesn't do a hybrid TV conference, because then we know we're really in trouble.
Don't give the events guys ideas.
Precisely. But we live in the real world. Telcos have real customers that they need to serve today. And so for vendors like ourselves, we need to be flexible and understand those real world examples and try to obviously provide solutions for them. But from our perspective, the flexibility comes from the cloud. It begins and ends there. And the most important value proposition, of course, is the cloud, for the most part, should be cheaper than these legacy IPTV services. So our goal is just to help you get there with an OpEx model in time, but being pragmatic. I mean, we live in the real world, right?
Ben, I mean, you're sort of sitting in that across that old IPTV world and the operator world. Do you agree with that, or do you think this is something that in the real world we're going to have these things for a very, very long time?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Every time we talk about trying to predict where things are going, a lot of times the discussion really should pivot on when as opposed to if. And so I was lucky enough to be around at the genesis of Media Room when we're starting that, and it was a big bet at that time around pure IPTV platforms, pure IPTV technologies. And 10 years later, we still see that the hybrid is in satellite transmission, cable transmission is still a big part of how the world receives TV on a daily basis, and we see that coming around or staying around for some time. I mean, when we look at the inflection points of where technology is going around compression, around network quality, it's funny, the more network quality that opens up, it's funny how much applications rise up to the challenge, if you will, and take up a lot of that network quality. And so we do think there is a lot of runway, if you will, ahead for hybrid type services. At the same time, we do believe that the eventual end state is very much anchored around IP.
But I would just add, to your point, Ben, that I think that the marketplace is going to move faster than possibly the vendor community or even operators.
Can we turn the mics up a bit, please? I'm having difficulties hearing, and I think some of the audience are having difficulties.
Yeah, I think that the market will move faster. I mean,
Thanks.
new devices, new services, and that being the case, look out for the next Spotify. Look out for those disruptors, because obviously somebody in a garage somewhere in Silicon Valley is building something right now. And for all of us, we should absolutely live in fear of that moment.
An interesting comment.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, jump in. There's
Apparently,
Sorry.
it's not the mics. You need to speak up a bit.
Okay. Did you
yeah,
want to?
I'll finish.
Okay.
So we're over to you.
Yeah,
Kate,
I
if
mean,
you could-
I think that what you'll see is, I agree, it is a question of probably when, not if. I think there's a general trend, and I think the trend is following the way that users want to be able to access content. And when you look at, today, I'm sure a lot of people here in the audience have kids at home. I can guarantee that their prime content device is going to be either their phone or their laptop. And so they're starting off from that point. And I think one of the challenges for people who are in the TV world is this idea that you're addressing an incredibly broad audience in terms of demographics. So you have people who are used to, we were talking earlier, it used to be such a simple world, right? It used to be your phone was your phone, your TV was for watching broadcast, and pretty much there wasn't the internet, and when the internet came, it was for doing things on the internet. Today we're seeing a world where things are coming together. From our point of view, we actually see that today the TV is more than a TV. It's actually an entertainment hub. And so we see the non-video use cases as expanding, and it's actually a great way to extend the use case for the TV manufacturers, set-top box manufacturers.
I don't know if anyone else has had this experience, but my 3-year-old goes up to the big screen and tries to touch it and slide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also the experience of, I want to watch this episode of Peppa Pig in the EPG next week. Why can't I watch it now?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
She gets
I think that's the
angry.
expectation nowadays. Why shouldn't I be able to watch it when I want it, or
But-
listen to
Kate,
it when I want it?
Presumably, we were discussing this earlier, you're platform agnostic. As long as there's a great box there with a UI in it that you can get your app onto to keep your subscribers happy.
Yeah,
You're happy.
I would say yes, absolutely platform agnostic, but we are very much, I think quality of service came up in several of the previous keynotes, and that is crucial. You really want to make sure the experience is fantastic, because you kind of have one shot at getting that user in, and if it's not a great experience, anyone who's used Spotify on, for example, a desktop, the human reaction time is 250 milliseconds, and the latency on Spotify is 285 milliseconds. So it really feels like it's already like a locally stored MP3. So you really want that speed. If you've been using Spotify on a mobile, and then you go to the TV and it takes much longer, it's not going to be a great experience. So that's the one thing I would add.
Lucas wants to bring you. Oh,
Yeah, no, I think-
you're going in there.
From that perspective, I agree. I agree with what all has been said, but I think we shouldn't forget about the role of the network. That remains, and everything can move to the cloud, and I'm sure we're going to transition to that. And the things that we're looking at, and part of our services are cloud-based. And but at the end of the day, it needs to come to people's devices, and I think there we're uniquely positioned with a very, very strong network and a broad customer base. And the other thing I'd like to point out, even with the huge growth of services, I think we've been doing hybrid OTT when it wasn't called that since 7-8 years. With the massive growth of services, of on demand, of multiple screens, there's still, depending on the market you look at, but on average, people are watching 4 hours of television on the main set in the home. Yeah. So it's the business is not dead. And I think what we also must keep in our minds that content costs money. Great content is great times for television production. There's some fantastic things out there, but they cost money to make. And we can't completely destroy the model that's currently working. So those are my thoughts in...
Right. But pay TV penetration, cable, satellite, all platforms, globally, is relatively small. And the opportunity, of course, greenfield opportunity, is using radio networks to get content the last mile to people that don't pay for content today. Sure. And we're seeing a massive opportunity, for example, in our space, where we're enabling operators to greenfield, sell content as a package, what a pay TV operator does, over a mobile network, right? And so that's the opportunity in my mind. And that's what the cloud does.
Exactly. And at the same time, we're also moving into mobile. So
precisely.
To that point, we may be all, well, in our various markets, we may be all sitting on 15, 20 megabit pipes into our homes, in addition to a over-the-air broadcast service. But if you're looking at markets like Nigeria or South Africa, fixed broadband is never going to reach the vast majority of those people. And even if it does, it's going to be years and years and years. I think Deloitte, I heard yesterday, were predicting sort of 2018 in Nigeria before people get that maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 megabits sufficient for video on demand. So that mobile opportunity becomes, along with the hybrid OTT service, becomes the best way for delivering for a number of years to come.
Precisely. Look, I mean, some of us that have been around for a while remember the promise of IP everything. And that's a reality today. And that's a nice thing. I mean, that's a really, really cool world to live in, right?
Yeah. And I think we also have to look at what are the exact customer expectations. So what we notice is when we have some freeze on PC or on tablets, our customer don't call the hotline. So they just try later. But if it's on the TV set, so the TV set they watch 4 hours a day, then they call the hotline. So the tolerance for the issues on qualities on TV set is really zero.
Yeah.
If we want to switch from proven models to new models, OTT, so we have some OPEX versus CAPEX, fixed cost versus proportional cost issues, but we also have to be able to guarantee this excellent quality on the TV set for the live. And I think that's definitely the key point.
That's a very good point. I think that whereas you are seeing new behaviours from younger consumers, I was on stage with the CEO of Vice yesterday. I suspect none of us are in their target demographic, but they are pure internet, and they do some HBO shows, and they are just extremely compelling video and an alternative voice to today's youth culture, which annoyed me as much as me explaining it. Sounds like it annoys me. But their business model is very much, we're going to co-produce, we're going to distribute over the internet, we're going to work with a YouTube channel. Yes, HBO is going to offer us some muddled money to put a series together, we'll do that too, but our primary delivery is going to be over the internet. They don't worry too much about quality of service because it's that internet generation that will watch 5, 6 minute clips on their phone, scale to that. So there is that audience coming. But yes, the TV audience is still growing. The amount of TV we're watching is still growing. And the amount of content available is both growing and getting better, which is a nice segue into my question before I throw it over to the audience. People often sort of say to me, oh, the content rights owners, they must be really, really reticent to let up some of these rights for these alternative over-the-top services. And my experience has been, no, they're not, but they definitely want more money for it. And that's where you're running into the wall of particularly renegotiating when you go back as your contract's expiring. I mean, is that going to continue as well, or do they eventually have to accept that there's this shoot for all of the content rights for every device, and there's a fundamental limit to how much you can charge for that? I mean, Lucas, coming from that...
We started, as I said, we started with some OTT-type services 7, 8 years ago, and it was a very, very difficult concept to explain. I mean, why do people want to look at my television shows on a PC? I mean, that's... so those were quite difficult discussions, and that difficulty continued, up until 3, 4 years ago, where the TV everywhere part now has become sort of a standard. So they understand it, and as long as it's authenticated and it's part of your regular service, that works. Now, when you're going into the more cloud-based services like Network PVR, you're starting to nibble on the edge of other windows in their monetization model. So we're going to have those conversations again. We think it's crucial to continue to have a vibrant pay TV business, to take the content where our customers expect it to be and expect it to be available to them. But they have very legitimate business concerns with that as well. So yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be difficult, but we'll get there.
May I ask Lucas a question briefly? What do you think about Aereo? I mean,
what do I think about Aereo?
Les Movies says Aereo wins the Supreme Court case, CBS goes over the top, and now we live in a completely different world. Internet, retrans, all local channels. I mean, your values for
it's very much. We don't operate in the US, so we're not really exposed to the specifics around
folks like
Aereo.
Magin in Europe who do something similar, only legitimately.
Magin actually does strike deals with the content providers.
They do.
So
No,
they're
it's
just an alternative.
legit. Yeah,
they're an alternative. Aereo, I think it's interesting to see what the Supreme Court is going to say.
Historically, they've enabled all of these innovations, right? Starting with the Sony Betamax decision. So,
yeah,
put your money on Aereo.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be interesting.
I would argue that the pay TV proposition, except for the premium channels, which is really TV everywhere anyway, goes away, and that now we live in an OTT everything world.
But there, I mean, if you define OTT as equivalent to it's free, then I don't agree with you, because then we'll have a completely different content landscape. And one of the outcomes of the Aereo case could be, if the Supreme Court supports Aereo's position, is that the network is going to say, well, okay, we'll go encrypted on air. We'll go encrypted DTT, DTH, and we're still in the same retrans discussion.
Except they are now talking to you as a billing platform, rather than necessarily a bundler and programmer of content.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, from our perspective, we like our Greenfield solution in Hungary is a pay TV service.
Right. Yes.
People pay for it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's interesting from a operator perspective when they think about all these rights. I think a lot of times, at least what I'm seeing right now, is there's a lot of experimentation going on. But at the end of the day, media, this entire space in general, is so much around scale, right? Like, how can you deliver the audiences? How a lot of the infrastructure around the economics of this is also around scale. And so, from the perspective of the content provider, I would imagine for entities that can bring them that scaled audience, allow them to monetize it in a way with a lot more precision, I would imagine eventually that's where the equilibrium will fall. Right now, no one's sure where that is, so there's a ton of experimentation going on. But in my role in the past when I was doing that, a lot of that budget was not coming out of the main budget. It was kind of coming out of the digital budget. It was coming out of the experimentation budget, right? But like when at the highest levels of the media companies and those organizations are starting to fund it out of the core budgets and really thinking about opening up their libraries in a very material way, I think eventually where that will land is really around that scale model. And I think the thing that needs to be added to that, though, is a better level of precision. You know, implied in that is some ability to monetize.
I think that's absolutely true. I mean, it's why a lot of the content providers don't mind putting stuff into transactional VOD, because it's, you don't sell anything. There's no skin off our nose, but everything you sell, we get a cut. But hold back from some of the advertising or subscription services because they're worried that, once it's out there, we're not going to get the revenue. But that changes as you start to see the number of people using these services go up, as you say.
Yeah, none of these multi-screen deals are, from a duration perspective, they're not very long right now.
No, exactly.
Everybody's leaving their options open.
Yeah. Sorry, can I just go ahead?
Yeah, please.
From an analytics perspective, we're talking to people all the time who are saying, I can see what's going on down this path, but I can't see what's going on down this path. And therefore, if we let customers watch our video on this new path, but we can't track what they're doing and we can't track if they're seeing the advertising and everything else, then that's a big issue for us, because all we're doing is giving them a way to take the content onto another device that we now can't monetize.
Yeah.
Right? And I think we're seeing this a lot. And I think people that delivered IPTV and cable services in the past are now completely reviewing the network infrastructure, not just for hybrid to be able to deliver to the home and use parallel CDN infrastructures for delivering DVR and things like that, and video on demand using the CDN infrastructure and back into their wireline infrastructure. They're taking the opportunity to look at that and say, all right, we can cover the hybrid, but we also need to be able to get the analytics for everywhere else that this content is providing, per the Ericsson discussion earlier. And I see hybrid as one thing, and we're seeing some great innovations there, and we're seeing actually the use of multicast technology to be able to get some of these adaptive bitrate, the volume of adaptive bitrate flows further out to the edge before it's converted into adaptive bitrate streams as well. But really, the hybrid is coming in lots of different ways, but they're also looking at ways to deliver off-net as well to other devices. So.
Good point. Questions from the audience? You are still out there. Any questions from the audience? Question down the front. Do we have mics? We do have mics. Questions down the front here. I'm sorry, I only got here about an hour ago.
Sorry, just to break the ice. So TV, as all you know, used to be advertising, that pays everything. Now we discuss, again, on who's paying, and there is no advertising on the panel there. I know how Spotify had been working for quite a while and revamp everything based on advertising since the beginning, but all the rest, truly things like operators, show self-service. And so it's how you guys picture the advertising on your offers.
Well, one of the best known brands for high-quality content is HBO, and that's advertising-free proposition. So it's not only advertising, it's also subscription fees that are driving this. But yes, advertising is a very important part of the revenue model. And one of the things that I see breaking down in the short term is how the measurement systems that are in place for the more traditional television viewing roll out across these multiple screen offers, the other devices. In most of the countries that we're active in, the establishers of the common currency have not yet fully established measurements across these other devices. And that explains part of the reluctance of the broadcasters, who are mostly advertising dependent or public funded, which is a different beast altogether, in walking down that path with us.
So I would say that with IPTV or hybrid satellite, we have made some experiment for targeted advertising. So it's possible with OTT, of course, but also with IPTV. But it seems that the advertising market is a bit slower to evolve than maybe the TV market. But I think there are some opportunities for changing the model from a broadcast to a targeted advertising. So I think it's possible technically anyway.
It's possible, and it's very interesting once you've got that return path, both for the device metrics and for splitting audiences into different types of adverts. But to Ben's previous point, until there's the scale, large advertisers aren't going to be interested in. Reaching 1 million boxes which have a hybrid capability and being able to segment that into 200,000 person audiences, that's not advertising. Yeah. That's almost below the line. It's mail shotting. Again, it's the audiences. The advertisers are very keen to do better advertising, more relevant advertising, get better metrics, and fund our services. But at the moment, they are either in their linear broadcast world or they're waiting for people to get to scale in their sort of hybrid world, I think.
Yeah, in our example, for our Telefonica implementation, Telefonica now has a service called Sunday TV and another called Terra TV. And that's ad insert based with analytics. We run an analytics platform for them. But for one telco, we have a global video platform, which is premise-based, largely for the legacy IPTV support. We've got a media room extension where we do the TV Everywhere stuff for Telefonica as well. And then we have this ad-supported platform. So from a vendor perspective, we know that for a large telco, we got to be able to do everything for them because, again, to your point, Ben, about experimentation, the telco wants to make sure that they are trying to monetize this as best they can, which means do a lot for us. Right?
But if you are an advertiser, one telco, even a big one, that's not enough. So you want to reach each and every customers, then you need some solutions that are implemented in one market. So it means that you have to discuss with 3-4 telcos in order to have a solution, something that is a standard and that you may play with later. So I think that could explain also that the advertising market is slow to evolve because all these telcos are competing against each other. Right. And what makes sense is that once a day they discuss together for that. And that's not obvious because we are not built like that. We are built to compete against each other.
I think that's fair.
Which is where look out for the disruptor that sees the telco as the billing platform and rides above it.
So I think that's we're out of time, but I think one of the other things that occurred to me when we were talking about Silicon Valley disruption is that 14 months to get a hybrid OTT platform out and your quality of service stuff, which sounds very expensive, very good and necessary, but very expensive.
Good value.
Those disruptors aren't going to pay for those, and you can have providers saying that they can launch an OTT service from a greenfield site in about 3 months.
Yeah, 90 days for our Telenor Hungary implementation.
There you go. So the pace of this is accelerating, and I think we are seeing potentially, not to go into the sessions on a downer, but more challenges from non-traditional competitors, not just pay TV providers, not just telcos, but ridiculous ideas like banks who are looking to buy into telcos quite significantly, or retailers where they have a big footprint to launch those kind of OTT services. That's a really interesting disruption that we'll probably see in the hybrid market over the next 1 to 2 years. It was a very short panel, I'm afraid. I'd like you to thank the panelists for their time and effort, and the tracks start in about 10 minutes, so you have 10 minutes to grab a coffee and some lunch maybe and join the tracks. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you. Thank you.